Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Weekly Roundup on Nordic Baltic Topics. I'm your host, James Ginn, and joining me as always, Victor Kubik from the Kubik Report. How you doing, Victor?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you, James.
Have a good week.
It's been a very good week. Done a couple of podcasts this past week. Did one about funerals and did another one that you can go and find out for yourself on the Kubik Report.
All right, very good. And welcome to all of our listeners to the Nordic Baltic Topics Weekly Roundup, of course, where we try to go and run down some of the significant events in the region that have happened over the past week and give a little bit of analysis, some of our opinions, and put a little light of a Christian background into some of these activities as appropriate. And we hope you enjoy joining us for the discussion. So, Victor, lots going on this week. I mean, of course, certain things just dominated the news this past week with President Trump's policies and, of course, Vice President Vance going down to the Munich Security Conference and a lot of things developing and could be causing a rift between the United States and Europe, something to think about as we go. And some of the stories we have here kind of dance around that dominating subject. So we're not going to talk about that one subject in detail. I think it's been beat to death in the news, but some of the things that maybe have been coming out of it and surround that event, which, is leading to some of that friction. And we'll just kind of jump right into, I don't know if you have any comments on that in particular before we jump into some of these subjects, but.
Well, what I can say, though, is I've been watching it just about probably as much as you have, and it's been beat to death, but I think there's still a long ways to go because every day the news shifts almost 180. And some of the comments that were made here a couple of days ago have been absolutely frightening as to where this will lead for the United States and Europe, Ukraine, and Russia. I mean, all four areas are very much now the focal point of this planet.
That's for certain. And, Europe is pretty dug in at this point on their position. And, of course, it's contrary to apparently what we're seeing coming out of the Trump administration. Just to show one of the areas where, we see Europe and its citizens dug in, Finland, this coming Monday. The Finns will be gathering to light candles in Helsinki's Senate Square to show support for Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And the event organizers are going to be distributing about 2,000 candles at no cost. And participants come and they can place their own candles on the Helsinki Cathedral steps. This comes as both President Alexander Stubb and Prime Minister Petteri Orpo have expressed support for Ukraine. Orpo calling for an extraordinary European Council meeting to discuss negotiations for peace that include the European Union and Ukraine, which, of course, the Trump administration has up to this point sort of left out. And at the Munich Security Conference, Orpo told Euractiv that Finland is pretty much worried about this situation, that a hastily negotiated peace in Ukraine could mean that Russia will then set its sights elsewhere, such as on the Finnish border. And of course, Finland says, well, we're not afraid and we're prepared, but also concerned.
And well, they should be concerned because they don't understand. I don't think that President Trump really understands the Russian mind unless he's kind of playing that game partially, because he doesn't understand that this is not making some kind of a real estate deal, that because he's the great negotiator and he can negotiate anything. I don't think that he can negotiate dug-in feelings, nationalism, whether it be in the Middle East or whether it be in the Slavic areas at all. And to me, I was so embarrassed for the American position, for how we look like to the world. And I can see that the prim and proper Europeans at that conference sitting there with their bewilderment and even anger towards what they're seeing and their incredulous looks on their faces as to what the United States is doing. They were maybe prompted thinking that might happen, but they didn't realize it would happen as quickly, as powerfully, and as clearly as it sounds now. And President Trump is not a person to back away, so they're wondering exactly where this is going to lead. Is he going to change course? Is this part of the negotiation or what? But the comments that were made regarding 4% support for President Zelensky, that's false. The fact that there are millions of people killed, that's also false. There's a lot of hundreds of thousands of people who have been killed, but there have been so many things that were wrong. And also that Ukraine started the war. That is absolutely patently false and really does give a question about the credibility of the president to the world. So where we are becoming more isolationist, we can become more and feel like we're going to be more secure. We're going to actually be more vulnerable.
It was a very pompous approach to go and say, look, we have all the answers, we have all the solutions, and we'll settle this while you kids, sit on the sidelines over there, even though it involves you and it's in your backyard. I think that's a very arrogant approach, and I think the Europeans are very rightly upset about it. And I don't know what it can achieve doing that. And you're right. I agree. It seems like President Trump has very little understanding of foreign policy, though he is extremely adept at domestic policy and things that need to happen perhaps domestically in the United States. He seems to be limited in his expertise to that area and doesn't understand how it plays into the broader world, which is very important in today's age.
Well, it's two things that have really united Europe here in the last 2-3 years. One is the actions of Putin has caused people to say, hey, wait a minute, we better unite. That includes Finland and Sweden joining become part of NATO. But the next thing is their fear of what Trump may or may not do. They're saying, wait a minute, we're not really part of this. We haven't been even invited to the initial discussions about the security of our continent. What is all this? And that's causing Europe to unite.
Oh, absolutely. And the there was a joint statement issued, in fact, by the Nordic Baltic leaders. All of them got together and issued a statement. It says, we stand firmly and fully and firmly behind Ukraine. Ukraine must be able to prevail against Russia's war of aggression to ensure a just and lasting peace. This is, of course, totally contrary to, what Trump's words recently have echoed, right? Calling Zelensky a dictator and saying that he's squandering all the money and mismanaging it and sort of siding with Russia here. So this is taking a contrary view from what the Nordic and Baltic states are saying. It says the outcome of the war, the joint statement here says the outcome of the war will have fundamental and long-lasting effects on European and transatlantic security. Our priority now is to strengthen Ukraine. Our countries are some of the largest per capita contributors of military assistance to Ukraine, and we will further broaden our support. It says we are engaging with Ukraine, the United States, and all NATO allies and EU partners on how to achieve peace through strength, and will fully commit to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. It says Ukraine should be given strong security guarantees. Ukraine and Europe must be involved in any negotiations to achieve joint and lasting peace. It says we're investing strongly in our own defense, and we're determined to further strengthen our collective security and defense and to shoulder our responsibility for peace and security in Europe. So making it clear that for them, this is a non-starter trying to leave Europe out of the negotiations.
And these people have been around for hundreds of years. It isn't like these are just college kids and from a new formed country. They have long histories. They have the wars between and among themselves. They know history. They know history better than the United States, which they look upon as just been a country for a couple of hundred years, 250 years. These people know history. They know Russia. They know the continual back and forths between Western Europe and the East, back and forth. And this is just another iteration of it. And what they're saying is they're shaking their heads. The Americans don't get it, and we do. And so we're going to take a stronger position as they are. And they're not going to back away from that, because I'm sure that they're, as we speak right now, all talking among themselves, what are we going to do about this?
Yeah, no kidding. And for Trump, it's 4 years and of his life, and he's going to try to do things to build a legacy and so forth, to look good in history and to try to do things domestically for the United States. And yet for the people in the Nordic Baltic areas, I mean, this is their day-to-day lives every day. and will continue to be, and whatever consequences come of the next 4 years, they have to live with. And so, yeah, it's a big issue, and one that's unsettling, to say the least.
Well, this whole week has been very, very unsettling to me. I have actually wanted to unsubscribe from some of my right-wing publications because I don't want to be hearing all this bragging and braggadocio and then supporting it, or having others support it and having to hear it.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Because it's, in the end, it's not going to serve anyone well. And call it a negotiating tactic. I know some try to defend it and say, well, this is President Trump just negotiating, and he's going to the extreme level, so that we can come back and find some middle ground somewhere. But you know what? You just don't start by slapping your allies in a negotiation. Maybe you put something hard out there, but you don't just undermine and degrade and demean. And it's very disappointing. I think obviously it's very disappointing to a lot of Americans as well, even those who voted, as some polling data already is beginning to show. People are starting to regret their decision, because this is not what people expected whenever they voted for him. Mm-hmm. Yeah, people were looking for him to work on the domestic economy and not go out and
yeah, brother offended is harder to win back than a walled city. And many of the Europeans have been offended because it wasn't something that they discussed beforehand as to, we're going to say this and here's how we'll plan it. It was basically dropped on them from a president who wasn't even at the Munich conference. He was fronted here by J.D. Vance, who really didn't do much service either. So we'll just be watching this and see where it goes, see if there's any change in direction. But also knowing Trump, he's a proud man. I don't think that'll be easy for him to say, whoops, sorry about that. I didn't mean to say that.
And another thing, he's threatening that, look, if these international organizations like the World Trade Organization, various organizations like that, he keeps threatening, well, if they don't do things the way we want them to, we're just going to pull out. We're going to pull away. And which is also profoundly dumb. If you excuse my saying that, it's just a complete understanding of what international organizations are there to do and what they represent. Are they problematic? Of course they are. Yet at the same time, they were created as an avenue where world leaders could come together and argue their side and could stand, for their countries in front of the citizens who elected them, for those who are democratically elected, and argue their case and to show them back home, hey, we care, and we're going to argue our case in the international forum and see what case can be made, rather than just, hey, let's load up the tanks and let's drive over and start shooting each other. Mm-hmm. And it hasn't stopped all wars by any means, but it has reduced the number of wars over the years incredibly. And in most of these organizations, the United States has veto power. And to walk away from them and leave a vacuum. There was a great article in The Atlantic, I believe it was, this week, talking about the vacuum the United States will leave. And guess who's waiting in the wings to step into it?
China.
Of course. I mean, where does this make sense in international policy? So we'll see, and we'll see where it goes. Mm-hmm. But we can move on from that issue. I mean, it's been talked about, and it's going to continue to be talked about for quite some time. I don't think this is going to go away anytime soon. But on to something a little more positive. Lithuania had their Independence Restoration Day. This is back on February 16th. Marked the anniversary of Lithuania's signing of the Act of Independence of Lithuania. I know that was a big celebration for the people there. Some excerpts from the act. It says the Council of Lithuania in its session of February 16, 1918, decided unanimously to address the governments of Russia, Germany, and other states with the following declaration. It says the Council of Lithuania, as the sole representative of the Lithuanian nation, based on the recognized right to national self-determination and on the Vilnius Conference's resolution of September 18 to 23, 1917, proclaims the restoration of the independent state of Lithuania, founded on democratic principles, with Vilnius as its capital, and declares the termination of all state ties which formerly bound this state to other nations. And Lithuania became independent, and the restored independent state existed right up until June 1940, until, guess what?
Russia. The Russians are here.
Yeah,
And you see, and that's why everybody is very, very cautious about the Russians, because the Russians, that independence was there for what, 21 years or so. And that was also true for Estonia. All those countries, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, had their independence, and they were viable countries. And for a period of 20 plus years, they were independent, or until 1945 for Estonia. Anyway, then the Russians moved in, and when the Russians moved in, it wasn't to liberate them, it was to occupy them. I mean, there are two things that the Russians had on their mind: was to beat back the Germans, but also to grab those territories, because the thing that was most important to them was the access to the Baltic Sea. And so they got that until 1990, for that period, for that 45-year period. Then after that, they have been independent, and they sure don't want to go back to what Russia, because Russia does have designs on having those areas which are not Slavic. One thing that the Russians make a big deal out of Ukraine: we're similar, we have a similar language. Well, not with these people. There's nothing similar between the Baltic people and the Slavic people. Nothing, really. Not only the language, but also the nature of the people, just the way they do things, the way they think. They want to be independent. There's nothing wrong about being independent. And to have nationalism, which you kind of bring up here, there's a right kind of nationalism of the fact that we are different, we have our strengths and weaknesses, and we learn to work with one another. So this is going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, that's right. And, nationalism was in full display, of course, as it usually is around something like this activity. The celebration on the 16th, of course, included honoring the signatories by marching along the path of the state of Lithuania. I like that. They go to the cemetery and they march along the same path, and they remember what was going on, and it roots them into what the thinking was and what the cause was all about, and where the signatories of the act walked. They of course do all the other things that you would think of: face painting and presenting awards and things like that. They hoist the flag of not just Lithuania, but of the 3 Baltic states, and light bonfires. It's a good time. They have some concerts. They held a couple concerts in town, one out on the street, and one at the Lithuania National Philharmonic, which I've actually sat in a concert in one time, and a nice place. So good for them. Glad they had that. And it does make you think of nationalism anytime these things come about. But you're right. There's a good form of nationalism, and there's a bad form of nationalism. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a good form.
In Minneapolis, where I lived, we had an annual Festival of Nations event in the auditorium there in St. Paul, where different nationalities had big booths set up. And in the booths, there were books, there were food, there were, the different nationalities were exhibiting their strengths. And it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. Every nation had different kinds of dances, different types of style of clothing. And it was just wonderful, because God does love variety. Doesn't want all of us to become a yellow pencil, and certainly not a Soviet pencil.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we were talking earlier about President Trump and his policy now with relation to Ukraine, but just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about it in relation to Greenland and Denmark, and he wanted to buy Greenland. Well, guess what? Now we've got to worry about Denmarkification. Mm-hmm. According to The Independent, a Denmarkification campaign has secured over 264,000 signatures as of now, and it's planned to buy the state of California, the U.S. state of California. It wants to, quote, make California great again and change its name to New Denmark. They've set up a parody crowdfunding website seeking to raise $1 trillion, give or take a few billion. No and I can, maybe, anybody can contribute a few bucks to that. Just need 1 trillion people. It's been set up for the purpose And then when you search for it in the website, it says to help Denmark buy California because why not?
That is so Scandinavian. That's just
because why not? And but I love their reasoning. The site acknowledges that Denmark needs more sunshine, palm trees, and roller skates, and ponders renaming Disneyland and putting Mickey Mouse in a Viking helmet. I think that'd be great, don't you?
No, I think that's. I know that that's a spoof and a parody, but it's really part of the whole thing there of President Trump all of a sudden, calling Canada the 51st state, which was a very offensive. And believe me, I have Canadian friends that is very, very offensive. If somebody comes to your home and you've been good neighbors, and all of a sudden says, "I want your garage," that's going to be part of my property, or it is so intrusive. And then also the talk of even renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, but it was done not as something which was a smooth thing, but there was a certain bite to it, and people really are offended by this one after another. And at some point, this offense is going to build to a point of where people will be repelled by this. Now, there's some people that just love this, just rah, rah, rah. Let's have 51st state. Let's take the canal back. Let's take over Greenland, pay him a few bucks because Donald Trump can. He's got the dollars, we'll buy Greenland. He's already got to figure it out. We'll take half of Ukraine's minerals away, and bang, 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 in big business style. He'll be able to rule the world morally, economically, militarily. Where's that headed?
Yeah. It's a very ignorant way of thinking, and I know, I feel like based on what Trump did in his first term, I feel like we kind of know what he's doing here. He's making these dramatic claims because he wants to start a negotiation, and he just starts way out there, hoping that he can achieve something really good with it. But what he doesn't understand, and what the people who are supporting this mentality don't understand, is that what you do is you're not just rattling the leaders who are going to be in the negotiations. You're turning a country against you. You are making everyone in that country uncomfortable with the alliance and the friendship that we have, saying, wow, can I trust you? I mean, these are just statements you don't make. And you're talking about the 51st state talk in Canada. I lived up in Canada for about 5 years, have a lot of really wonderful friends up in Canada. And one thing that I learned while I was there is they really have a lot of pride in their nation. And even calling themselves, the true North, right? I would sometimes refer to the northern United States. I would say up north, and no. This is the North. This is the true North. I mean, they take a lot of pride, and to come and say something like that is a betrayal of their trust.
And the Canadians, they have kind of a nature about them, maybe a little bit more laid back, but I have Canadians that are very, very good friends all over. People who have immigrated with my parents. Some went to the United States and some went to Canada. And so we still have a lot of contact with them, but they're very fiercely aware of the fact that they are Canadian. And there's one friend that I have, a very dear friend in Toronto. They go to Cuba very often, and they've gone there for years. And they say that one thing that's said about Cuba is that they really enjoy the visitors that come there. Number one is that they have so many Canadians that are there, and there are no Americans. No people from the States. They like the nature of the Canadians, and that's like one of the highlights of that the Canadians will have to deal with the Americans and the Cubans don't have to. So for whatever that's worth, that's just an interesting observation.
Yeah. And and they've been such good friends to the United States. Denmark has been such a good friend to the United States, and all of these countries are, and to treat them with that sort of disdain is really disappointing to see. I mean, you don't walk up to your good friend because maybe you want to borrow their car, and you walk up and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take your house, and there's nothing you can do about it. But I want your car. You sort of violate the friendship when you do that, don't you?
Well, you violate that, and these people have been, after World War II, very, very grateful to the United States for everything that they did to World War II. They have adopted the Americans. It's interesting that in Denmark, I don't think they do it anymore, but they also celebrated the 4th of July. I mean, along with their Day of Independence, they actually celebrated that when I was in high school. They celebrated the 4th of July because it showed respect and love for the American people.
Yeah, and they've continuously done that. I remember, September, 11, whenever that happened, how many countries came out and just joined and showed support and have continued to do that and have helped us in wars and conflicts, and they've been right there at the side of the United States, and it's just sad to see that. But you do see some making light of it to sort of illustrate the point and kind of reverse it and turn it around, like with this Denmarkification project. It is humorous, but it does make a point, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the Denmarkification website, one of the things they say says, they reason that Trump might actually sell California because he's called it the most ruined state in the union. That's his own words. So they reason, well, because of that, he might be willing to part with it for the right price. And they've even offered to throw in a lifetime supply of Danish pastries to sweeten the bills.
Well, in the same manner that Trump wants to buy Gaza.
Yeah, so it's a tip. Yeah, right. So,
to take it over. Why not?
Yeah, so that's kind of where we are. I mean, it's a ridiculous notion probably to a lot of people in the United States whenever they look at that and say, oh, wow, Denmark wants to buy California. But I think that's the point, is flip it around and for the leaders of the United States to come and say these things. It's just as ridiculous to those people who the United States is making these claims for. So anyway, on to a lighter note. Have you heard of Tommy Cash?
Well, not until you told me about him. I've heard of Johnny Cash, but not until I wrote this, and I read what you wrote, and I thought, well, I better look this guy up.
Well, Estonia is sending Tommy Cash to the 2025 Eurovision Song Contest in Switzerland this coming May. He's going to represent Estonia with an interesting and unusual piece titled Espresso Macchiato. It's led to a little bit of controversy in Italy, and of course, because it's much of the language is Italian. I mean, it's talking about using an Italian name and so forth. But some of the Italians feel like he's not representing their country well and is making fun of it. Mm-hmm. While he won the final round of voting in Estonia with 83% of the vote, the exaggerated Italian phrases and references, some even making allusions to the mafia and so forth, have gotten some Italians saying it should be disqualified from entry. Have you watched the video of this? It's very unusual.
I will. I mean, you're talking about it now, and I read this here, but I hadn't gone there. But I will be looking at it because from what you said about the Italian connection and the mafia, and the fact that this is a type of thing that people want to see shine. Some of the things that are bizarre that attract attention that way, that's what they do for halftime shows. That's what they do for the Super Bowl. That's what they do for something like this, of something that is a little bit half bubble off level.
Well, this guy, Tommy Cash, he's known for his bold visuals and sounds, according to the Eurovision website. So, I mean, this is something they know he does this. He's a conceptual artist. He combines post-Soviet aesthetics with some of the global trends. He has sort of a twisted humor, and it's really evident whenever you look at the video and you listen to the lyrics of the song. It's high energy. It's kind of catchy, really, and not everyone is opposed to it. Mm-hmm. A lot of YouTubers have actually made comments that seem to be supportive of the song. Even, in fact, one YouTuber, he says, as an Italian, he says, I'm amused, but also confused, but also offended, but also honored.
I saw all four things.
Yeah. So, doesn't really know what to think of the song. But Estonia's prime minister, Krista Michael, said, well, now coffee lovers have their own song. So he didn't think there was an issue, and is rooting for Tommy Cash, of course. But what it does kind of illustrate is, song can be very controversial, and it can cause conflict and cause people to argue over various things. And in one case, they're arguing that, this song could lead to cliches that are harmful in society among the youth. What power does music have? And should we ban songs that we think have a harmful influence on you? What should we do with these types of songs?
Well, different cultures put different values on music as to what it portends. When I came out of college in 1969, it was the year of flower power and all the psychedelic music. It gave the nation, it gave our generation, I was 21 when I graduated from college, and it gave it a certain feel that I feel didn't play well. It was not necessarily totally wholesome, but I don't want to complain about people who want to have some fun, who want to play the Beach Boys. I remember that back when the Beach Boys were brought in to the White House for some kind of an event, the vice president at that time, really complained about that, about having this type of personality, come to the White House, and the music of what it portend. And now the Beach Boys are quite tame.
Right.
So it's a lot of it is the music, how it sounds, what it makes you feel, whether it causes you to think sinful thoughts. That's wrong. But also there's a lot of good music. I remember that one huge song that was in my time when I was like in 8th grade was "Theme from a Summer Place." Beautiful. And it was popular. So,
well, one thing that I've noted, I often don't hear the words to music, to songs, and it's kind of difficult for me sometimes to pick out the words. And but I like music. I am musically inclined, and I even like to listen to a lot of classical music without words, and jazz and things like that, as well as other music. But anyway, I'm usually listening more for music than I am for words. But sometimes you do find yourself singing like a chorus or something that is easy to pick out, and you're singing it in your mind. And I got to thinking about this recently because it's very subtle and it's very clever, because you don't even realize sometimes what you're saying, but you've internalized a piece of music or lyric that you've heard, that you've kind of sung along with. You didn't even think about consciously, and now suddenly it's become a part of you, and you've internalized it, and now you're repeating it, and you suddenly catch yourself like, whoa, what am I saying? What am I singing here? So I can understand the individuals who think that maybe it could promote harmful cliches, but then where do you draw the line on the artistic expression at the same time and free speech? So
that's a very good question. I do feel like if it promotes sinfulness, my son, was telling me his daughter is singing certain songs that were on the radio, and perhaps they're not perfect doctrinally. He said that he'd far rather her sing those songs than to be singing something like "Give Me a Man After Midnight." So it's it depends upon what it makes you think and do. It what for young people, it makes them believe what is right and what is wrong.
It does, and that's where maybe today the issue is more about the fact that there's so few major promoters of music and songs in the world, and they have control sort of over the agenda. In fact, if you look at I can't remember all the details, but if you look at the number of songwriters that are out there, and I mean, it's a small group of people that are producing a lot of the music that is being distributed to the world today. A lot of different artists that are performing it, of course, but the people who are deciding what is actually going out, what message is being delivered out in the world, is actually rather small. And our young people are influenced by it heavily. And that might be an issue, that society wants to look at and see, because it does have a way of shaping the future, of shaping the morals of society and the mores going forward. So something to consider. But it's a fun song for sure. This particular song, when you listen to it.
Well, it's Estonian. It's on Eurovision. It's got Tommy Cash. I will listen to it.
It's different. It's certainly different. We just had, I guess we should talk about this, a big event this past week, February 14th. In the world that's celebrated as Valentine's Day. Probably a lot of people celebrate it without realizing its origins and really thinking about some of the things that where we got that from. But one country that has kind of taken its own take on this Valentine's Day celebration is Sweden. And February 14th in Sweden is not Valentine's Day. It's called All Hearts Day. It's relatively new. It just entered the calendar back in the 1980s. Of course, it was introduced through the retail industry, which was influenced by American pop culture and so forth. But rather than having a romance inspired theme, All Hearts Day is about reaching out and showing appreciation to basically everyone in your life, whether it is your partner, whether it's your friend, your colleague, or whoever it might be. Could be even your pet. And it's become widely accepted and embraced in the country. So while Valentine's Day has clear origins that might make a Christian take pause in its celebration, what about All Hearts Day? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have really no comment. I know that we don't celebrate certain holidays that have pagan origins, and some of them have spin-offs to other things that make it more tame. Frankly, I really have no opinion. I don't get upset about Halloween or Valentine's Day because I just ignore them in my life. And as my children were growing up, we ignored them as well. So I would say that as far as my feeling is concerned, these things that maybe are derivatives of pagan societies, cultures, religions, whatever gods of the past, I would just ignore them. I truly believe that we need to be preaching what's true and right and good and wholesome, what's from the Bible, and not be preaching against something. I mean, you set people off on the wrong foot. You get people angry at you. Perhaps it's irreconcilable from the way you come across to them. But talk about the right things. And there are many, many right things to talk about. They should be talked about on human behavior, the human future, the human hope, and that type of thing. And just get your mind off of trying to condemn and to change things that people don't even know about or where the origins were, or making them feel like they were bowing down to some kind of a pagan deity, which they really weren't.
Very nicely said. And with that, I think we're going to cut out for this week. Victor, always enjoy having you with us. And everyone can check out the Cubic Report with Victor. He does usually a couple episodes a week. Where can they find that, Victor?
You can find it anywhere on the internet. Just type in The Cubic Report. Cubic spelled Kubik. Or you can find me on most platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many others. We're also trying to work our way into YouTube. We don't have all of our episodes on there, but we're trying to put them on as we can.
All right, and join us again next week on the Nordic Baltic Topics Weekly Roundup.